My name is Catherine O'Hare, and I am doing the reading portion for my honors project. Introduction. In the early 2000s, many internet users started to gravitate towards a new search engine. It was called Google, and it delivered remarkable results. Put in a keyword, and in a blink of an eye, the search engine would return a list of links with the most relevant links appearing at the top of the page. People quickly realized that Google was an amazing tool, enabling users to quickly find almost anything they wanted on the web. To effortlessly sort through the vast sea of information contained in billions of web pages and relative to the precise information they desired. It seemed like magic. Before long, to Google became a verb. In June 2006, the verb Google was added to the Oxford English Dictionary. To find out more about a person, you would Google them. To find out more about a subject, you would Google it. If you wanted to find a good or service, enter a keyword in Google and a list of relevant links would be returned in an instant. For many users, Google quickly became the go to page every time they wanted information about anything. What captured the attention of the business community, however, was Google's ability to monetize its search results. Google's core business model was the essence of simplicity. The companies the company auctioned off the keywords used in searches to advertisers. The highest bidders would have links to their sites placed on the right hand side of the page, returning search results. Nowadays, the links appear at the top of the page. The advertisers would then pay Google every time someone clicked on a link and was directed to their website. Thus, when bidding for a keyword, advertisers would bid for the price per click. Interestingly, Google did not necessarily place the advertisers who bid the highest amount per click at the top of the page. Rather, the top spot was determined by the amount per click multiplied by Google's satisfactual statistical estimate of the likelihood that someone would click on the advertisement. This refinement maximized the revenue that Google got from its valuable real estate. By 2022, Google dominated the online search market with an 80% plus global share of all searches, desktop and mobile, via which it generates strong revenue growth and profits. In 2021, Google's parent company, Alphabet, recorded revenue uh, of 258 billion, net income of 75 billion, 103 billion in free cash flow, and a return on investment capital of 28.4%. Alphabet drivers nearly all deliver derives, geez, nearly all its revenue and all its profit from the Google search engine business. Although its Google Cloud Platform business is now growing rapidly and earned revenues of 19.2 billion in 2021. In the United States, which is the most competitive of all major markets in which Google competes, in 2021, Google processes 3 times and 4 times as many desktop search requests as Bing, Microsoft, and Yahoo, which is Verizon, respectively. Microsoft's Bing has been gaining share in desktop searches, where it had 26.8% of the market in early 2022, up to 19.6%, um, up from 19.6% in 2014. Google had a 61.4 share of US desktop searches in 2021, down from 67% in 2014. However, Google completely dominates the mobile search market with a 95% plus Google shares and 93% in the United States. Microsoft, which does not have a viable mobile phone operating system, has less than 2% of the market. Apple, which has a 55% share of mobile phone operating systems with iOS, uses Google as the default search engine. A search engine connects the keywords that users enter to a database it has created of websites, an index, in which produces a list of links to pages and summaries of content that it believes are most relevant to the query. Search engines consist of four main components: a web crawler, an index, a runtime index, and a query processor. The interface that connects users to the index. The web crawler is a piece of software that goes from link to link on the web, collecting the pages it finds and sending them back to the index. Once in the index, sophisticated algorithms that look for statistical patterns, analyze web pages. Among other variables, for example, Google's page ranking algorithm looks at the links on a page, the text around those links, and the popularity of the pages that link to that page to determine how relevant a page is to a particular query. In total, Google's algorithm looks at more than 100 factors to determine a page's relevance to a query term. Once analyzed, pages are tagged. The tag contains information about the pages, for example, whether it is porn or spam, written in a certain language, or updated infrequently. Tag pages are then dumped into a runtime index, which is a database that is ready to serve users. The runtime index forms a bridge between the back end of an engine, the web crawler, and index, and the front end, the query processor and user interface. The query processor takes a keyword inputted by a user, transports it to the runtime index, where an algorithm matches the keyword to pages, ranking them by relevance, and then transports the results back to the user, where they are displayed on the user's interface. The computing and data storage infrastructure required to support a search engine is significant. It must scale with the continued growth of the web and with demands on the search engine. In 2021, Google had 56 billion in information technology assets on its balance sheet, and another 59 billion tied up in land and buildings. A significant chunk of these assets were in 23 data centers, each of which contained up to 1 million servers, each configured in large-scale clusters dedicated to the job of running its search engines. Are we still good? Cool. The early days of search. The first internet search engine was Archie, created in 1990 at McGill University in Montreal, Canada, before the World Wide Web had burst into the scene. Archie connected users through queries to the machine on which documents they wanted were stored. The users then had to dig through the public files on those machines to find what they wanted. The next search engine, Veronica, developed in 1992 at the University of Nevada, Reno, improved on Archie's insofar as it did allow searchers to connect directly to the document that they queried. Veronica was the primary search engine for Gopher Protocol, an alternative system to the World Wide Web. The web started to take off in 1993 with the number of websites expanding from 130 to more than 600,000 by 1996. At this expansion, as this expansion occurred, the problem of finding the information you wanted on the web became more difficult. The first web based search engine was the www Wanderer, developed by Matthew Gray at MIT. This was soon surpassed by WebCrawler, which was a search engine developed by Brian Pinkerton of the University of Washington. WebCrawler was the first search engine to index the full text of web pages as opposed to just the title. WebCrawler was sold to AOL for $1 million in 1995. This marked the first time anyone had ascribed an economic value to a search engine. In December 1995, the next search engine appeared on the scene, Alta Vista, developed by an employee at Digital Equipment Corporation, DEC. Lewis something liked web crawler. Alta Vista indexed the entire text of a web page. Unlike web crawler, Alta Vista sent out thousands of web crawlers, which enabled it to build the most complete index of the web to date. Avid web users uh, soon came to value the service. However, two things handicapped the search engine. First, it was a stepchild within DEC, which saw itself as a hard drive driven business and didn't really know what to do with the Alta Vista. Second, there was no obvious way for Alta Vista to make much money, which meant that it was difficult for Manier to get the resources required for Alta Vista to keep up with the rapid growth of the web. Ultimately, in 1998, Compaq Computer acquired DEC. Compaq then sold AltaVista and related internet properties to an internet firm, CMGI. At the height of the internet boom in 1999, for $2.3 billion in CMGI stock. CMGI did have plans to spin off AltaVista in an initial public offering, but it never happened. The NASDAQ stock market collapsed in 2000, taking CMGI stock down with it, and the market had no appetite for another .com. OPI. In early 2003, AltaVista was purchased by Overturn Services Inc., who later that year was acquired by Yahoo. Around the same time that AltaVista was gaining traffic, two other companies introduced search engines, Lycos and Excite. Both search engines represented further incremental improvement. Lycos was the first search engine to use algorithms to try and determine the relevance of a web page for a search query. Excite utilized similar algorithms. However, neither company developed a way of making money directly from search. Instead, they saw themselves as portal companies like Yahoo, AOL, and MSN. Search was just a tool to increase the value of their portal as a destination site, enabling them to capture revenues from banner ads, e-commerce transactions, and the like. Both Lycos and Excite went public and then squandered much of the capital raised on acquiring other internet properties before seeing their value implode as the internet bubble burst in 2001 or 2000 to 2001. Another company that tried to make sense out of the web for users was Yahoo, but Yahoo did not use a search engine. Rather, it created a hierarchy directory of web pages. This helped drive traffic to its site. Yahoo emerged as one of the most popular portals on the web. In contrast to many of its smaller competitors, Yahoo's industry leading scale allowed it to make good money from advertising on its site. Yahoo did add a search engine to its offerings, but until 2003, it always did so through a partner. At one time, Alta Vista powered Yahoo's search function, then Inktomi, and ultimately Google. Yahoo's managers did consider developing their own search engine, but they saw it as too capital intensive. Search required a lot of computing power, storage, and bandwidth. Besides, there was no business model for monetizing search. That, however, was all about to change, and it wasn't Google that pioneered the way. It was a serial entrepreneur called Bill Gross. GoTo.com, a business model emerges. Bill Gross made his first million with Knowledge Adventure, which developed software to help kids learn. After he sold Knowledge Adventure to Kin Kindinant, whatever, for 100 million, Gross created Idea Land, a business incubator that subsequently generated a number of internet startups, including GoTo.com. GoTo.com was born from Gross's concern that a growing wave of spam was um, detracting from the value of search engines such as AltaVista. Spam arose because publishers of websites realized that they could drive traffic to their sites by including commonly used search keywords such as used cars or airfares on their websites. After the words were in the same color as the background of the website, black words on a black background, so that the web users would who would suddenly wonder why their search for used cars had directed them to a porn site could not see them. Gross also wanted a tool that would help drive good traffic to the websites of a number of internet businesses being developed by Idea Lab. In Gross's view, much of the traffic arriving at the website was undifferentiated. People who had come to a site because of spam, bad portal real estate deals, or poor search engine results. Gross established GoTo.com to build a better search engine, one that would defeat spam, produce highly relevant results, and eliminate bad traffic. Gross concluded that a way to limit spam was to charge for search. He realized that it was unworkable to charge the internet user, so why not charge the advertiser? This led to his key insight. The keywords that internet users typed into a search engine were inherently valuable to the owners of websites. They drove traffic to their sites, and many sites made money from that traffic. So why not charge for the keywords? Moreover, Gross realized that if a search engine directly hired quality traffic to a site, it would be possible to charge more for relevant keywords. By this time, GoTo.com had decided to license search engine technology from Inktomi and focus its efforts on developing the paid search model. However, GoTo.com faced a classic chicken and egg problem. To launch a service, the company needed both audience and advertisers, but it had neither. To attract advertisers, GoTo.com adopted two strategies. First, GoTo.com would only charge advertisers when somebody clicked on a link and it was directed to their website. To Gross's way of thinking, For merchants, this pay per click model would be more efficient than advertising through traditional media or through banner ads on web pages. Second, GoTo.com initially priced keywords low as 1 cent a click, although they could, of course, be bid above that. To capture the audience, a website alone would not be enough. GoTo.com needed to tap into the traffic already visiting established websites. One approach was to pay the owners of high traffic websites to place banner ads that would direct traffic to GoTo.com's website. A second approach was, which ultimately became the core of GoTo.com's business, was to syndicate its services, allowing affiliates to place co-branded GoTo.com search boxes on their site, or to use GoTo.com search engine and identify the results as partner results. GoTo.com would then split the revenue from search rep. GoTo.com would then split the revenues from search with them. GoTo.com had to pay an upfront fee to significant affiliates who reviewed their websites as valuable real estate. For example, in late 2000s, GoTo.com paid AOL $50 million to syndicate GoTo.com's listings on its sites, which included AOL, uh, CommuService, and Netscape. To finance its expansion, GoTo.com raised more than $53 million in venture capital funding, a relatively easy proposition in the heady days of the dot-com boom. In June of 1999, GoTo.com raised another $90 million through an initial public offering. GoTo.com launched its services in June of 1998 with just 15 advertisers. Initially, GoTo.com was paying more to acquire traffic than it was earning from clicks through ad revenue. According to its initial OPI filing in its first year of operation, GoTo.com was paying 5.5 cents a click to acquire traffic from Microsoft's MSN sites and around 4 cents a click to acquire traffic from Netscape. The average yield from this traffic, however, was still less than the cost of acquisition, resulting in red ink. Not an unusual situation for a .com in the 1990s. However, momentum was beginning to shift towards the company. As traffic volumes grew and as the advertisers began to understand the value of keywords, yields improved. By 1999, the price of popular keywords was starting to rise. The highest bidder for the keyword software was 59 cents a click. Books was 38 cents a click. Vacations was 36 cents a click. And porn, the source of so much spam, was 28 cents a click. The turning point was the AOL syndication deal signed in September of 2000. Prior to signing with AOL, GoTo.com was reaching 24 million users through its affiliates. After the deal was reached, uh, After the deal, it was reaching 60 million unique users of, or some 75% of the United States internet audience. AOL itself had 23 million subscribers, CommuService 3 million, and Netscape, which was owned by AOL, another 31 million registered users. With over 50,000 advertisers now in its network and a large audience pool, both keywords prices and click through rates increased. GoTo.com turned profitable shortly after the AOL deal was put into effect. In 2000, the company earned net profits of 20.2 million on revenue after 200 of revenues of 288 million. In 2002, it earned 73.1 million on revenues of 667.7 million, making it one of the few .com companies to break into profitability. In 2001, GoTo.com changed its name to Overturn Services. The name change reflected the results of a strategic shift. By 2001, the bulk of the revenues coming from affiliate sites, with the GoTo.com website only garnering 5% of the company's total traffic. Still, the fact that GoTo.com had its own website that was in effect competing with the traffic going to affiliates created potential channel conflict. Many in the company feared that the channel conflict might induce key affiliates such as AOL to switch their alliance. After much internal data debate, the company decided to phase out the GoTo.com website, focusing all of its attention on the syndication network. Around the same time, Bill Gross talked to the founder of another fast growing search engine, Google, about whether they would be interested in merging the two companies. At the time, Google had no business model. Gross was paying attention to the fast growth of traffic going to Google's website. He saw a merger as an opportunity to join a superior search engine with Overturn's advertising and syndication network. The talks stalled. However, reportedly because Google's founders stated that they would never be associated with a company that mixed paid advertising with organic results. Within months, Google had introduced its own advertising service using a pay per click model that looked very similar in conception to the Overturns. Overturned sued Google for patent infringement. To make matters worse, in 2002, AOL declined to renew its deal with Overturn and instead switched to Google for search services. By 2003, it was clear that although still growing and profitable, Overturn was losing traction to Google. Overturn's revenues were on track to hit 1 billion in 2003, and the company had 80,000 advertisers in its network. Moreover, Overturn was invisible to many of its users who saw the service as part of the offering of affiliates, many of whom were powerful brands, including Yahoo and Microsoft MSN. Yahoo and Microsoft were also waking up to the threat posed by Google, realizing that paid search was becoming a highly profitable market. Both began to eye Overturn to jumpstart their own paid search services. While Microsoft decided to build its own search engine and ad service from scratch, Yahoo decided to bid for Overturn. In June of 2003, a deal was announced with Overturn being sold to Google for $1.63 billion in cash. The payday was a bittersweet one for Bill Gross. Idea Lab had done very well out of Overturn, but Gross couldn't help but feel that a bigger opportunity had slipped through his fingers and into the palms of Google founders. As the patent case, as for the patent case, this settled in 2004 when Google agreed to hand over 2.7 million shares to Yahoo. This represented about 1% of the outstanding stock, which at the time was valued at $330. After Google's IPO, the value of those shares was closer to 1 billion. Google started as a research project undertaken by Larry Page while he was a computer science PhD student at Stanford in 1996, called Backrub. The goal of the project was to document the link structure of the web. Page had observed that while it was easy to follow links from one page to another, it was much more difficult to discover links back. But put differently, just by looking at a page, it was impossible to know who was linking to that page. Page reasoned that this might be very important information. Specifically, one might be able to rank to value of a web page by discovering which pages were linking to it, and if those pages were themselves linked to many other pages. Um, to rank pages, Page knew that he would have to send out a web crawler to index pages and archive links. At this point, another PhD student, Sergey Brin, became involved in the project. Brin, a gifted mathematician, was able to develop an algorithm that ranked web pages according not only to the number of links into the site, but also the number of links into each of the linking sites. This methodology had the virtue of discounting links from pages that themselves had few, if any, links into them. Brandon Page noticed that the search results generated by this algorithm were superior to those returned by AltaVista and Excite, both of which often returned irrelevant results, including a fair share of spam. They had stumbled onto the key ingredient for a better search engine. Ranking search results according to their relevance was a backlink methodology. Moreover, they realized that the bigger the web got, the better the results would be. With the basic details of what was now a search engine worked out, Brin and Page released it on the Stanford website in August 1996. They christened their now search engine Google after Google, the term for the number one followed by 100 zeros. Early on, Brin and Page talked to several companies about the possibility of licensing Google. Executives at Excite looked but passed, as did executives at InfoSeek and Yahoo. Many of these companies were embroiled in the portal wars, and the portals were all about acquiring traffic, not about sending it away via search. Search just didn't seem central to their mission. Still going. By late 1998, Google was serving some. Oh, Jesus. Google was serving some 10,000 queries a day and was rapidly outgrowing the computing resources available at Stanford. Brin and Page realized that to get the sources required to keep scaling Google, they needed capital, and that meant starting a company. Here, Stanford's deep links in Silicon Valley came in useful. Before long, they found themselves sitting together with Andy something, one of the founders of another Stanford startup. Sun Microsystems something watched a demo of Google and wrote a check on the spot for $100,000. Google was formally incorporated on September 7th, 1998, with Page as CEO and Brin as president. From this point on, things began to accelerate rapidly. Traffic was growing for nearly 50% of a month, and enough to attract the attention of several angel investors, including Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, who collectively put in another million. That was enough. That was not enough. Search engines have a uh, ferocious appetite for computing resources. To run its search engine, Brennan Page had custom designed a low cost Linux based server architecture that was modular and could be scaled rapidly. But to keep up with the growth of the web and return answers to search queries in a fraction of a second, they needed even more machines. By the late 2005, the company was using over 250,000 Linux servers to handle more than 3,000 searches a second. To finance growth of their search engine in early 1999, Brennan Page started to look for venture capital funding. It was the height of the dot-com boom and the money was cheap. Never mind that there was no business model. Google's growth was enough to attract considerable interest. By June 1999, the company had closed its first round of venture capital financing, raising 25 million from two of the primary firms in Silicon Valley, Sequoia Capital and Kleiner Perkins, Quafield, and Breyer. Just as importantly, perhaps, the legendary John Doerr, one of Silicon Valley's most successful investors and a Klein Perkins partner, took a seat on Google's board. By late 1999, Google had grown to around 40 employees and it was serving some 3.5 million searches a day. However, the company was burning through 500,000 a month and there was still no business model. They had some licensing deals with companies that used Google as their search technology, but they were not bringing in enough money to stem the flow of red ink. At this point, Google started to experiment with ads, but they were not yet pay per click ads. Rather, Google began selling text based ads to clients that were interested in certain keywords. The ads would then appear on the page returning search results but not in the list of relevant sites. For example, if someone typed in Toyota Corolla, an ad would appear at the top of the page above the list of links for Toyota Corolla cars. These ads were sold on a cost per thousand impressions basis, or CMP. The being the Roman numeral for thousand. In other words, the cost of the ad was determined by how many people were estimated to have reviewed it, not how many clicked on it. It didn't work very well. The management team also started to ponder placing banner ads on Google's website as a way of generating additional revenue. But before they made that decision, the dot-com boom imploded. The NASDAQ crashed and the volume of online advertising dropped precipitously. Google clearly needed to figure out a different way to make money. How many more do I got? Google gets a business model. Let me take a little break. It looks like we are partners on this case study. When you submit yours and then hover over team evaluations at the top, it allows me to evaluate yours. Okay. Google gets a business model. Brendan Page now looked closely at the one search company that seemed to be making good money, GoTo.com. They could see the value of the pay per click model and of auctioning off keywords, but there were things about GoTo.com that they did not like. GoTo.com would give guarantees that the website would be included more frequently in the web crawls. Um, making sure they were updated, provided that the owners were prepared to pay more. Moreover, the purity of GoTo.com search results was biased by the desire to make money from advertisers, with those who paid the most being ranked highest. Brin and Page were ideolo- ideologically attached to the idea of serving up to the best possible search results to users, uncorrupted by the commercial considerations. At the same time, they needed to make money. Although Bill Gross pitched the idea of GoTo.com teaming up with Google, Brin and Page decided to go it alone. They believed they could do as good a job as GoTo.com, so why share revenues with the company? The approach that Google ultimately settled on combined the innovations of GoTo.com with Google's superior relevance based search engine. Brin and Page had always believed that Google's web page should be kept as clean and elegant as possible, something that seemed to appeal to users. Moreover, they knew that users valued the fact that Google served up relevant search results that were unbiased by commercial considerations. The last thing they wanted to do was alienate their rapidly growing user base. So they decided to pace place text-based ads on the right-hand side of a page, clearly separated from search results by a thin line. GoTo.com, like GoTo.com, they decided to adapt a pay-per-click model. Unlike GoTo.com, Brin and Page decided that in addition to the price an advertiser had paid for a keyword, ads should also be ranked according to relevance. Relevance was measured by how frequently users clicked on ads. More popular ads rose to the top of the list, less popular ones fell. In other words, Google allowed their users to rank ads. This had a nice economic advantage for Google, since an ad that is generating $1 a click but is being clicked on 3 times as much as an ad generating $1.50 a click would make significantly more money for Google. It also motivated advertisers to make sure that their ads were appealing. The system that Google used to auction off keywords was also different in detail from that used by Google or by Go2.com. Google used a Vickery second price auction methodology. Under this system, the winner pays only 1 cent per more than the bidder below them. Thus, if there are bids of $1.50, 25 cents for a keyword, the winner of the top place pays just 51 cents, not $1. The winner of the second place at 26 cents was, and so on. The auction is nonstop, with the price for a keyword rising or falling depending upon bids at each moment in time. Although the minimum bid for a keyword was set at 5 cents, most were above that, and the range was wide. One of the most expensive search terms was reputed to be mesothelioma, a type of cancer caused by exposure to asbestos. Bids were around $30 per click. They came from lawyers vying for a chance to earn lucrative fees by representing clients in suits against asbestos producers. While developing this service, Google continued to grow like wildfire. In the mid 2000s, the service was dealing with 18 million search queries a day, and the index surpassed, 1 billion documents, making it by far the largest search engine on the web. By late 2000, when Google introduced the first version of its new service, which is called AdWords, the company was serving up 60 million search queries a day, giving it a scale that GoTo.com never came close to achieving. In February 2002, Google introduced a new version of AdWords that included, for the first time, the full set of pay per click advertising, keyword auctions, and advertising links ranked by relevance. Ad sales immediately started to accelerate. Google had hit on the business model that would propel the company into the big leagues. Whew. In 2003, Google introduced a second product, AdSense. AdSense allowed third party publishers, large and small, to access Google's massive network of advertisers on a self service basis. Publishers could sign up for AdSense in a matter of minutes. AdSense would then scan the publisher's site for content and place contextually relevant ads next to that content. As with AdWords, this is a pay per click service. But with the AdSense, Google splits the revenue with the publishers. In addition to large publishers such as online news sites, AdSense has been particularly appealing to many small publishers, such as web bloggers. Small publishers found that by adding a few lines of code to their site, they could suddenly monetize their content. However, many advertisers felt like AdSense is not as effective as AdWords in driving traffic to their sites. Google allowed advertisers to opt out of AdSense in 2004. Despite this, AdSense soon grew into a respectable business, accounting for 15% of Google's revenue in 2005, or close to 1 billion. How much more do I got? Oh my lord. Where was I? Google grows up. Between 2001 and 2022, Google changed a number of ways. First, in mid 2001, the company hired a new CEO to replace Larry Page, Eric Schmidt. Schmidt had been the chief technology officer of Sun Microsystems and then CEO of Novell. Schmidt was brought on to help manage the company's growth with the explicit blessing of Brin and Page. Both Brin and Page were still in their 20s, and the board felt that they needed to grow up. Who had run they needed to grow up, who had run a large company to help Google transition to the next stage. Google turned a profit the month after Schmidt joined. Brin and Page became the presidents of the technology and products, respectively. When Schmidt was hired, Google had over 200 employees and was handling over 100 million searches a day. According to knowledgeable observers, Schmidt, Brin, and Page acted as a triumvirate, with Brin and Page continuing to exercise strong influence over strategies and policies at Google. Schmidt may have been CEO, but Google was still very much Brendan Page's company. Working closely together, the three drove the development of a set of values and organization that would come to define the uniquely uniquely Google way of doing things. In January 2011, Schmidt retired from the CEO position, passing the reins back to Larry Page. Schmidt remained chairman while Brin turned his attention to overseeing Google's experimental technologies division, Google X. As Google's growth started to accelerate, there was concern that rapid hiring would quickly dilute the vision, values, and principles of the founders. In 2001, Brin and Page gathered a core group of early employees and asked them to come up with a policy for ensuring that the company's culture did not fracture as the company added employees. From this group and subsequent discussions emerged a vision and list of values that would continue to shape the evolution of the company. Not new These were not new, rather they represented the formalization of principles that Brennan Page felt they had always adhered to. The central vision of Google is to organize the world's information and make it universally acceptable and useful. The, te- the team also articulated a set of 10 core philosophies, values, which are now listed on the website. Perhaps the most significant uh, and certainly the most discussed of these values is captured in the phrase don't be evil. The central passage message underlying this phrase was that Google should never compromise the integrity of its search results. Google would never let commercial considerations bias its rankings. Don't be evil. However, has become more than that at Google. It has become a central organization principle of the company, albeit one that is far from easy to implement. Google got positive press from libertarians when it refused to share its search data with the US government, which uh, wanted the data to help fight child porn. However, the same cons- constituency reacted with dismay when the company caved into the Chinese government and removed from its Chinese services, offering results for search terms such as human rights and democracy. Brin justified the Chinese decision by saying that it will be better for Chinese web users because ultimately they will get more information, though not quite all of it. Although core values of Google is focus on the user and all else will follow, in many ways this value captures what Brin and Page initially did. They focused on giving the user the best possible search experience, highly relevant results delivered with lightning speed to an uncultured and elegant interface. The value also reflects a brief belief that at Google that it is okay to deliver value to users first and then figure out the business model for monetizing that value. This belief seems to reflect Google's own early experience. Yet another key principle, although it is not one that is written down anywhere, is captured by the phrase launch early and often. This seems to underpin Google's approach to product development. Google has introduced a stream of new products over the years, not all of which were initially that compelling, but through rapid upgrades, it has subsequently improved the efficiency of many of these products. Google also prides itself on being a company where decisions are data driven. Opinions are said to count for nothing unless they are backed up by hard data. It is not the loudest voice that wins the day in arguments over strategy, it is the data. In the In some meeting, people are not allowed to say I think. Instead, in some meeting, once the argument or strategy is the data. In some meeting, people are not allowed to say I think, but instead the data suggests. Finally, Google devotes considerable resources to making sure that its employees are working in a supportive and stimulating environment. To quote the company's website, Google puts employees first when it comes to daily life in a Googleplex headquarters. There is an emphasis on team achievements and pride in individual accomplishments that contribute to the company's overall success. Ideas are traded, tested, and put into practice with an alacrity that can be dizzying. Meetings that would take hours elsewhere are frequently little more than a conversation in line for lunch, and few walls separate those who write the code from those who write the checks. This highly communicative environment fosters a productivity and camaraderie fueled by a realization that millions of people rely on Google's results. Give the proper tools to a group of people who like to make a difference, and they will. Organization. Google has always operated with a flat organization. By the mid 2000s, Google had one manager for every 20 line employees. At times, the ratio has been as high as 1 to 40. For a while, one manager had 180 direct reports. Until 2011, the structure was organized around 5 main functions: engineering, products, sales, legal, and finance. Within and across functions, there were numerous teams. Big projects were and still are broken down and allocated to small, tightly focused teams. Hundreds of projects could be going on at the same time. Teams often throw out new software in 6 weeks or less and look at how users respond hours after. Google can try a new user interface or some other tweaks with just 0.1% of its users and get massive feedback very quickly, letting it decide a project's fate in weeks. In 2011, shortly after assuming the CEO position, Larry Page modified the organization, creating a structure with 6 product groups, each with its own functions, and each headed by a senior VP who reported directly to him. The product groups were mobile, social, e.g., Google Plus, Chrome browser and operating system, YouTube search, and ads. Another division, Google X, was created to oversee the exploration and development of experimental technologies. Sergey Brin leads this division until his retirement in 2019. The organization was undertaken to increase accountability and control, speed up innovation, and reduce bureaucracy. Prior to the reorganization, there were reports that the company's freewheeling culture had led to an anarchic resource allocation process, extensive duplication with multiple teams working on the same project, and increasingly dysfunctional political behavior. There were also reports that Google's organization was not scaling that well, that the firm's personal development was collapsing, and that absolute chaos reigns. One former employee noted that when she was hired, nobody knew when or where she was supposed to work. Larry Page has remarked that he is very pleased with the way the organization has worked out and believes it has helped Google to scale. Uh, One aspect of Google's organization that has garnered considerable attention is the company's approach towards product development. Employees are expected to spend 20% of their time on something that interests them away from their main jobs, seemingly based on 3M's famous 15% rule. Google's 20% rule is designed to encourage creativity. The company has set up forums on its internal network where anyone can post ideas, discuss them, and solicit help from other employees. As a natural part of this process, talent tends to gravitate to those projects that seem most promising, giving those who post the most interesting ideas the ability to select a talented team to take them to the next level. Like 3M, Google set up a process by which projects coming out of 20% time can be evaluated, receiving feedback from peers, and ultimately garner funding. Until 2011, Marissa Mayer, one of Google's early employees and now CEO of Yahoo, acted as a gatekeeper. She helped decide when projects were ready to be pitched to Brin and Page. Once in front of the founders, advocates have 20 minutes and no more to make their pitch. Meyer articulated several other principles that guide product development at Google. These include ideas come from everywhere, set up a system where good ideas rise to the top. Focus on users, not money. Money follows consumers. Advertisers follow consumers. If you amass a lot of consumers, you will find ways to monetize your ideas. Innovation, not instant perfection. Put products on the market, learn and iterate. Don't kill projects, morph them. If an idea managed to make its way out of the door, there is usually some kernel of truth to it. Don't walk away from ideas. Think of ways to reduce or to replace or rejuvenate them. One of the early products to come out of 20% time was Google News, which returns news articles ranked by relevance in response to a keyword query. Put them put the term oil prices into Google News, for example, and the search will return news dealing with changes in oil prices, with the most relevant at the top of the list. A sophisticated algorithm determines relevance on a real time basis by looking at the quality of the news source, whether it be the New York Times rates higher than local newspapers, publishing dates, the number of other people who click on that source, and numerous other factors. Krishna Bharat, a software engineer from India, who, in response to the events of September 11th, 2001, had a desire to learn what was being written and said around the world, initiated the project. Two other employees worked with Bharat to construct a demo that was released within Google. Positive reaction soon of got Bharat in front on Brian and Page, who were impressed and gave the project a green light, and Bharat started to work full time on the project. Other products to come out of 20% time include Google Maps, Gmail, and AdSense. Another feature of Google's organization is its hiring strategy. Like Microsoft, Google has made a virtue out of hiring people with high IQs. The hiring process is very rigorous. Each prospect must take an exam to test their conceptual abilities, be This is followed by interviews with 8 or more people, each of whom rate the applicant on a 1 to 4 scale, 4 being I would hire this person. Applicants also undergo detailed background checks to find out what they are like to work with. Reportedly, some brilliant prospects don't get hired when background checks find out they are difficult to work with. In essence, all hiring at Google is by committee. And while this can take considerable time, the company insists that the effort yields dividends. While accounts of Google's organization and culture tend to emphasize their positive aspects, not everyone has such a snoo view. Brian Reed, who was recruited into senior management at Google in 2002 and fired 2 years later, told author John Battelle, Google is a monarchy with two kings, Larry and Sergey. Eric is a puppet, and Larry and Sergey are arbitrarily whimsical people. They run the company with an iron hand. Nobody at Google, from what I could tell, had any authority to do anything of consequence except Larry and Sergey. According to Battelle, several other former employees made similar statements to him. Some former employees have noted the in practice 20% time can turn out to be 120% time, since people still have their regular workload. There are also complaints that the culture is one of long work days and 7-day work weeks, with only consideration for family issues. Strategy. In 2001, Since 2001, Google has endeavored to keep enhancing the efficiency of its search engine, continually improving the search algorithms and investing heavily in computing search resources. The company has branched out from being a text based search engine. One strategic thrust has been to extend search to as many digital devices as possible. Google started out on PCs, but its fasting fast fastest growing revenue stream is now on mobile devices. A standard strategy has been to widen the scope of search to include different sorts of information. Google quickly pushed beyond text into indexing the effort of offered up searches of images, news reports, books, maps, apps, scholarly papers, and blog search, a shopping network, and videos. Not all of this has gone smoothly. Book publishers were angered by Google's Book Project, which seeks to create the world's largest searchable digital library of books by systematically scanning books from the libraries of major universities such as Stanford. The publishers argued that Google had no right to do this without first getting permission from the publishers and was violating copyright. Several publishers fielded a complaint with the U.S. District Court in New York. Google responded that users would not be able to download entire books, and that in any event, creating an easy to use index of books is fair use under copyright law and will increase the awareness and sales of books, directly benefiting copyright holders. On another front, the World Association of Newspaper Publishers formed a task force to examine the exploitation of content by search engines. Since going public, Google has introduced a rash of product offerings. many of which seem to represent diversification away from the company's core search business. Most of these products grew out of the company's new product development process. They have included Gmail, Google Workspace, Blogger, Google Plus, social networks, King site, the Chrome browser, and operating system. The Android operating system for mobile devices, smartphones and tablets, site wide fiber optic networks, Google Fiber, and Google Cloud. Not all of these were successful. Google Plus, for example, failed to gain any traction against Facebook and was shut down. However, several of them have been spectacular successes, most notably Android, the world's top mobile operating system, and Chrome, the world's top web browser. Google Workspace is a cloud based offering that seems aimed squarely at Microsoft's Office franchise. Workspace includes word processing, spreadsheet, and presentation programs along with Gmail and Google Drive for cloud storage. Google Workspace is designed for online collaboration. Files can save files Files can save files in formats used by Microsoft products, although they lack the full set of Microsoft Office. Google has stated that the company is not trying to match the features of Office and that 90% of the users don't necessarily need 90% of the functions that are in there. Google offers Workspace to business customers for a licensing fee of between $6 to $18 a month per person. In late 2000, Google announced a suite of software for smartphones that included an operating system, Android, and applications that work with it. Android was aimed squarely at Apple's iPhone and Research in Motion's BlackBerry, which at the time were the leaders in the smartphone space. Apple's iPhone had been introduced in 2007 and it was redefining the market for smartphones. Like Apple's iPhone, Android was phones had a touch screen, a virtual keyboard, apps displayed on screen as icons, and an ability to download third-party apps from an app store that Google established. The attraction for Google was that advertising was increasingly being inserted into content viewed on mobile headsets. Google decided that Google decided to give away Android to device manufacturers for free, aiming instead to make money through mobile search traffic. The free mobile turned out to be remarkably successful. Free model turned out to be remarkably successful. Android was very appealing to the smartphone manufacturers such as Samsung, HTC, and Motorola, all of whom needed an operating system that would help them to build phones that could compete with Apple's iPhone. When Apple introduced the iPad in 2010, Google quickly followed with a version of Android that could run tablets. By 2022, Android was the dominant operating system for smartphones with a worldwide market share of 72%. Apple was second with 27% share for its iOS operating system. As noted earlier, however, Google had a 95% plus share of mobile searches in 2021. This is occurring because Apple used Google as the default search engine on all iOS devices, mobile and desktop. According to news reports, by 2020, Apple received an estimated 8 to 12 billion in an annual in annual payments from Google in exchange for building Google's search engine into its products. One calculation suggests that Google paid Apple $15 billion in 2021. In October 2010, Google reported that its mobile advertising revenues were growing strongly due to the adoption of Android and that it now had hit annualized run rate of 1 billion. By 2014, estimates suggest that Google was generating more than 13 billion from mobile searches. Its share of mobile ad revenues stood at 41%. Facebook was second in the mobile space with 18% of the market. Google's App Store was renamed Google Play in 2012. Like Apple's iTunes, Google Play allows users to download applications and digital media, including music, video, movies, TV programs, etc., and books. By mid 2013, Google Play had 1.3 million apps available and registered over 50 billion downloads. Google Play is now the second largest distribution channel in the world for apps and digital media by revenues, behind Apple's App Store. Estimates suggest that Google Play generated gross revenues of around 48 billion in 2021. Apple's App Store had gross revenues of 80 to 85 billion in 2021. Another remarkable successful new product offering from Google has been its Chrome browser. Released at the end of 2008, Chrome has steadily gained share on both desktop and mobile devices. By June 2022, it had 66% global market share, followed by Safari with 18.6%, and Microsoft's Edge browser with 4%. On the acquisition front, until 2006, Google struck to purchase small technology firms. This changed in October 2006 when Google announced that it would purchase YouTube for 1.64 billion in stock. YouTube is a simple, fun website to which anybody can upload video clips to share them. In October of 2006, some 65,000 video clips were being uploaded over every day and 100 million were being watched. Like Google in its early days, YouTube initially had no business model. The thinking was that Google would find ways to sell advertising that is linked to video clips on YouTube. By 2002, the by 2002, YouTube had more than 2.6 billion monthly active users who watched around 1 billion hours of video every day, which helped to generate an estimated 30 billion in annual advertising revenue. Another notable Google acquisition was its 3.1 billion purchase of DoubleClick in 2007. DoubleClick is a specialist on online display advertising, such as banner ads that are targeted at building brand awareness. Internet publishers pay DoubleClick to insert display ads on their websites as users visit their websites. While display advertising has not grown as rapidly as search-based advertising, it is a big business accounting for around a quarter of all internet advertising revenue, with significant upside potential as companies begin to apply demographic technology to increase the effectiveness of internet display ads. The DoubleClick deal was criticized by Google's rivals, including Microsoft, on antitrust grounds, but regulators in the United States and the EU approved the deal, which closed in 2008. By 2021, estimates suggest that Google generated about 30% of its advertising from display ads and the rest from search generated ads. Facebook, however, earned more from display ad revenue. Critics argue that as Google moves into these additional areas, its profit margins will be compromised. One analysis argued that in its core pay per click search business, Google makes profit margins of about 60%. In its more recent business of placing advertisements on web pages belonging to other people, such as bloggers, its profit margins are 10 to 20% because it is harder to make the advertisements as relevant to the audience and its must share the resulting revenues. Displaying advertising also offers lower returns. Google, not surprisingly, does not see things this way. The company argues that since its costs are mostly fixed and incremental revenues are profit, it makes good sense to push into other markets, even if its average revenue per viewer is only 1 cent, compared with 50 cents for each click on the web. Oh, dear Lord. Oh, almost done. The online advertising market in 2022. There is an old adage in advertising that half of the money spent on advertising is wasted. Advertisers just don't know which half. Estimates in the early 2000s suggest that about half of the worldwide advertising spend was wasted because the wrong message was sent to the wrong audience. The problem was that traditional media advertising was indiscriminate. Consider a 30-second ad spot on broadcast TV. Advertisers pay a rate for such a spot called CPM, cost per thousand. The CPM is based on estimates of how many people are watching a show. There are numerous problems with this system. The estimates of audience numbers are only approximate at best. The owners of the TV may have left the room while the commercials are airing. They may channel surf during the commercial break, be napping, or talking on the telephone. The viewer may not be among the intended audience. A high end sports car commercial might be dismissed by a high school student, for example. By contrast, newer digital advertising models based on pay per click are more discriminating. Rather than sending out ads to a large audience, only a few whom will be interested in the product being advertised. Consumers select into search based ads. They do this twice. First, by entering a keyword in a search engine, and second, by scanning the search results as well as the sponsored links and clicking on a link. In effect, potential purchasers pull the ad towards them through the search process. Advertisers only pay when someone clicks on their ad. Subsequently, the conversion rate for search based ads is far higher than the conversion rate for traditional media advertising. Put differently, less advertising money is wasted. Moreover, addition moreover, traditional advertising was so wasteful that most firms only advertise 5% to 10% of their products in the mass media, hoping that other products would benefit from a halo effect. In contrast, the target nature of search based advertising makes it cost effective to advertise products that only sell in small quantities. In effect, search based internet advertising allows producers to exploit the economics of the long tail. Pay per click, pay for click models also make it economical for small merchants to advertise their wares on the internet to a bigger audience than they could ever reach through traditional channels. The growth story. Powered by the rapid growth of search based pay per click advertising and increasing amount of time people spend online, total advertising spending on the internet has expanded rapidly over the last 2 decades. In 2000, internet advertising revenues were valued at 8 billion. In 2013, internet ad revenues hits 117 billion, and they were forecasted to reach 195 billion by 2018. By 2021, more than 65% of the 700 billion spent on advertising globally was on the internet, and around 450 billion, and that share is expected to continue to grow over time. Google's competitors. Historically, Google's most significant competitors include Microsoft and Yahoo in search, and Meta, the owner of Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp, is display advertising. Both Yahoo and Microsoft spent several years and hundreds of millions in R&D spending trying to improve their search engine technology and gain market share at the expense of Google. Yahoo failed, their share declined, and Yahoo was bought by Verizon in 2017. Microsoft recorded moderate but steady market share gains after it launched its Bing search engine in 2008, reaching a 26% share of the US desktop search market in 2021. However, following the failure of its Windows phone to gain However, following the failure of its Windows Phone to gain share in the 2010s and the discontinuation of that offering in 2020, Microsoft has almost no presence on the large and fast growing mobile search market that now accounts for more than 50% of total search based advertising spend. Microsoft has long struggled to make profit in this search business, even as revenues have grown. In 2021, Bing generated 8.53 billion in revenue for Microsoft, but the search engine is believed to be the only marginally profitable on operating basis, and on an investment basis, it is probably still deep in the red. Reports suggest that in its first decade, Microsoft racked up cumulative losses of over 15 billion in search, and it seems unlikely that it will recoup those anytime soon, even though the unit finally started to become profitable in 2017. The problem for Microsoft is that because its search traffic is far lower than Google's, the price that it can get for auctioning keywords is significantly lower too, which results in lower revenue per click. For Microsoft to challenge Google, it must have a significant presence in the mobile search, and it does not. While Microsoft is struggling to gain traction in search after 2 decades of trying, while Microsoft trying, another company has been gaining ground: Amazon. Amazon's search business is linked to its sprawling e-commerce site and primarily exists to promote products in its online marketplace, the world's largest. Like Google, it uses a pay-per-click model. When many people consider purchasing physical goods, they search on Amazon first. By one estimate, nearly 75% of American consumers begin their product search on Amazon. This strong buyer intent drives up keyword prices and enables Amazon to make higher revenues per click due to its rapidly growing search business, which some estimates suggest about accounts for 90% of all US searches in the early 2000s. Amazon became the third largest digital advertising company behind Google on Facebook with 31.2 billion in 2021 revenues. roughly the same as the entire global newspaper industry. Finally, in digital display advertising, Meta is a powerful competitor. Founded in 2004 as Facebook, its three leading platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp, make it the largest social network in the world with nearly 3 billion active users. 2 decades of growth in users and user engagement, along with the valuable data that they generate, makes Meta's platform attractive to advertisers. With more user interaction among friends and family, and the sharing of videos and pictures. Meta has compiled even more social data, which the company and advertising clients then use to launch online advertising campaigns targeting specific users, thereby increasing the ROI for every advertising dollar spent for physical 2021. This dynamic helped to drive Meta's revenue to 118 billion and net income to 39.4 billion, almost all of which comes from targeted digital display advertising. And I think that is it.